This video introduces the world's largest unsolved UFO case. This story actually took place in a quiet forest in the east of England and is one of the most credible UFO cases. It is known as the Rendlesham Forest incident, still recognized today as the most famous case in the United Kingdom. This is not merely an urban legend or a rumor. It is an event in which the people involved testified under their real names, and which is recorded in official documents, a documented incident. By following the perspectives of the witnesses, we will attempt to uncover the truth behind this mysterious case. December 1980. In Suffolk, England, at the U.S. Air Force Bentwaters Base, which stood next to Rendlesham Forest, a quiet Christmas was drawing to a close. The soldiers stationed overseas had decorated modestly for the season, savoring the Christmas night in a foreign land, as they read letters from their families. But the calm atmosphere was shattered the very next day. Into the silent forest it appeared. December 26th. In the area stood two U.S. Air Force bases, Bentwaters and Woodbridge. At the time, the world was in the midst of the Cold War. Tensions with the Soviet Union had reached their peak, and this location was considered an extremely important strategic outpost. The silence was broken at around 3 a.m. on December 26th. Security guards at Woodbridge Base witnessed a pulsing red light descending deep into the forest to the east of the base. The first to spot it was Airman First Class John Burroughs. From the gate at the edge of the base, he reported seeing a bright light, flashing irregularly, being drawn into the forest beyond. It looked just like a plane had gone down, he later recalled. Upon receiving the report, the command center immediately checked for any records of aircraft traffic in the nearby airspace, but found none. There were no reports of crashes or emergency landings, and no irregularities in communications. Even so, taking the situation seriously, the command ordered a small team of personnel to be dispatched into the forest. Thus, Sergeant Jim Penniston, Airman First Class John Burroughs, and Airman Edward Cabansag set foot into the forest in the middle of the night. They headed toward the direction where the light was said to have fallen. Relying on the narrow beam of their flashlights, they slowly advanced, crunching through fallen leaves that reached up to their knees. On the ground, they found faint impressions resembling triangular landing marks. The surrounding trees bore scorch-like marks, and the readings on their radiation meter were rising. And then, deep within the forest, they finally discovered the source of the light. Through the gaps between the trees, a metallic light emerged, slowly pulsing as if it were breathing. It was unlike any aircraft they had ever imagined. A smooth surface, hovering silently in midair. It felt as though it was gazing back at them. In that moment, their understanding of reality began to shatter. The events that unfolded over the following days would later be called Britain's Roswell incident, captivating UFO researchers around the world for decades to come. Sergeant Jim Penniston and his companions quickly realized that what stood before them was clearly something artificial. It was about 2 meters tall and roughly the same in width, shaped almost like an inverted triangle. Its surface was remarkably smooth, with a sheen that resembled glass or polished metal. Even more intriguing were the markings engraved along its side, symbols of sorts. Circles, straight lines, and various geometric shapes were arranged in precise order, appearing almost like the hieroglyphs of an ancient civilization. They slowly, quietly approached it. Penniston, caught between fear and curiosity, slowly reached out his hand, and the moment his fingertips touched the object, it flooded Peniston's mind with something, as if pouring straight into his consciousness. It was not words, nor was it images. Deep within his brain, accompanied by a tingling sensation like an electric current, an endless stream of zeros and ones poured in. An experience almost beyond belief. In the days that followed, Peniston would, without conscious intent, fill 16 pages of his notebook with this binary code. At first, no one knew what it meant, but Peniston himself was certain. This has to be a message of some kind. Then, without warning, the object slipped silently deeper into the forest and vanished completely. It left behind only the afterimage of its light, no sound, no smoke, as if it had never existed at all. Upon returning to the base, they immediately reported the incident to their superiors. However, contrary to expectations, the matter was handled cautiously and quietly. In the following days, Peniston underwent a brief examination at the infirmary, after which he was ordered to rest at home. Yet the symbols and numbers from that night remained vividly imprinted in his mind. It might have been a message from the future, he later said, his eyes reflecting just how deeply the experience had shaken him. The binary code he recorded in his notebook would eventually be deciphered by researchers, revealing an astonishing meaning. But that is a story we will explore in detail a little later. What happened next was even more intriguing. 2 days after the initial incident, Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt went out to the site with several of his men. On the night of December 28th, 2 days after the events of the first night, the base's upper command finally took action in response to the strange sightings that had been spreading among personnel. Multiple soldiers had reported seeing unidentified flying objects, and mysterious flashes and red lights had continued to be observed intermittently in the direction of the forest. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt of Bentwaters Air Base regarded this not as mere rumor, but as a serious matter concerning the safety of the base. He made the decision to conduct an on-site investigation himself, carrying a radiation meter and a tape recorder, and set out deep into the forest with a small team. That night, Lieutenant Colonel Halt documented the events in what would later become known as the Halt Memo. This report was eventually declassified and officially released by the U.S. Department of Defense, becoming a major piece of evidence that bolstered the credibility of the incident. They arrived at the site shortly after 10 p.m. The sky was clear, and the moonlight cast a dim glow over the forest floor. At what was believed to be the landing site from the first night, strange traces still remained. The first thing they confirmed were 3 triangular impressions in the ground, spaced evenly apart, as if the landing legs of some craft had pressed down into the soil. In addition, the surrounding trees bore scorch-like marks about 2 meters above the ground. When a radiation meter was held up to these trees, readings more than 3 times the normal level were reportedly recorded. For documentation, Lieutenant Colonel Halt kept a cassette tape recorder running, narrating events as they unfolded. That audio is still publicly available today, preserving the tense tone of his voice and vividly capturing the atmosphere at the scene.
Watch. Ready to head off my flash right there, sir. There it is. Hey, I see it too. What is it? We don't know, sir. So can I get some of it? Yeah, it's a strange, small red light. Looks to be maybe a quarter to half mile, maybe further out.
Sometime after midnight, a member of the investigation team noticed something unusual in the sky.
There's something in the sky. No mistake about it. Ahead of us, there's some kind of strange, flashing red light.
I can see a yellowish one too. Strange. It looks like it's moving a bit toward us. It's brighter than it was before.
It was a glowing red sphere, hovering in the night sky beyond the forest trees. At times it appeared to be perfectly still, only to suddenly accelerate and dart away, moving as if it had instantly jumped to another location. It's moving north at unbelievable speed. Now it's back again. Now east. It's coming toward us. It's definitely coming toward us. This is not an aircraft.
We're observing the object now. It's probably about 200 to 300 yards away. It's still moving side to side, almost like an eye winking at us. Through the starscope, it looks hollow in the center, with a dark area, almost like a pupil winking in our direction. And through the starscope, the light is so bright, it feels like it could burn my eyes.
The flying object reportedly ascended higher into the sky, emitting what looked like a red laser beam toward the ground before eventually disappearing. The investigation continued until around 4 a.m., after which it quietly came to an end. This series of records goes far beyond being just a soldier's eyewitness account. The date, location, and people involved are clearly identified, and even an audio recording exists, making it an exceptionally credible testimony. And yet, the incident was officially brushed aside by the higher command. The UK Ministry of Defence stated there was no threat to national security and refused to conduct a deeper investigation, while at the same time never actually denying that the incident had occurred, maintaining an ambiguous stance. However, Lieutenant Colonel Halt, who was directly involved, has consistently maintained, "I know what I saw." Even after his retirement, he spoke in interviews, firmly stating, "That was not of this earth." The UFO sighting in Rendlesham Forest was, at first, shared only within military circles. Witnesses were instructed to avoid speaking about the details, and the investigation report was kept within a very limited scope. Halt's own Halt memo was submitted to the higher command, but for many years it was never made public. It was not until 3 years later, in 1983, that this incident became known worldwide. Through the U.S. Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, the contents of the memo were finally revealed, sending shockwaves through the public. Even then, the official stance of the authorities remained that there is nothing of significance in this case. They continued to attribute it to witness misperception, or a misidentification of the lighthouse light, showing no intention of pursuing a true investigation into what had really happened. However, the testimonies of those who were actually present contain details far too specific to be dismissed with such simple explanations. For years, Sergeant Jim Peniston kept silent, but in the late 1990s, he finally broke his silence. He revealed that immediately after touching the glowing object, he experienced a powerful flash of light, and with it, a certain memory. Airman First Class John Burroughs stated that on that night, he had an experience as if he had entered the UFO and into the light. Yet, for a long time, the details remained vague, and he testified that it was as if the memory had been blocked. In addition, Airman Edward Cabansag refrained from making any statements in the aftermath of the incident and did not speak publicly about it for decades. Rumors suggest that behind this silence was pressure, an unspoken "do not talk" order. The discrepancies in these testimonies, as well as the silence surrounding them, are overshadowed by a certain measure reportedly taken immediately after the incident. That measure was said to involve memory manipulation and hypnosis administered to some of those involved. This information came to light years later through UFO researchers, who reported that a special unit from the United States had been dispatched right after the incident to conduct interviews and provide so-called psychological care to the witnesses. Some of the witnesses have said, "Parts of my memory from that time are hazy," or "maybe it was just a dream." Yet others remain convinced, declaring, "I definitely saw it, and it was real." In this way, the Rendlesham incident goes far beyond a simple UFO sighting. It embodies the deeply significant themes of information control and memory manipulation. Now we turn our attention to the binary code Sergeant Peniston experienced the moment he touched the object. Back in 1980, it was sealed away as an unreadable string of mysterious numbers that no one could decipher. Peniston himself kept the notebook hidden for many years, never showing it to anyone, locking it away in the depths of his memory. But in the 2000s, the notebook was finally made public, and experts began attempting to decode it. Across its 16 pages, rows of zeros and ones were neatly arranged, clearly forming a deliberate pattern rather than a random sequence. Binary code specialists soon discovered that the message contained astonishing phrases. The team working on the decoding included computer engineers and cryptography researchers. They determined that the code was written using ASCII, a character encoding standard for converting numbers into text. When the zeros and ones were translated using this system, English words began to emerge one after another. It contained messages such as exploration of humanity or planetary advance, eyes of your eyes, origin, and more. In this way, a series of strange and enigmatic keywords emerged from the code. What drew particular attention were several sets of geographic coordinates found within the code. In total, 7 locations were listed, many of which corresponded to sites of ancient civilizations or well-known mystery spots. For example, the Nazca Lines, Peru, the Pyramid Complex, Egypt, Sedona, Arizona, USA, unexplained ancient tomb clusters in China, ancient ruins in Scotland, United Kingdom, and the final entry pointed to Skellig Michael, an uninhabited island off the west coast of Ireland. In ancient Celtic lore, this place was said to be a gateway to the other world. Why these specific locations were chosen remains a mystery. The chances of it being mere coincidence seem far too slim. To dismiss the code as simply a random string of data feels implausible. Furthermore, some researchers claim that the code also contains spatio-temporal coordinates, information pointing not only to places, but to points in time. In other words, it may be a temporal message sent from either the future or the past. Peniston himself has said, "The object I touched may not have come from outer space. It might have been something that crossed space-time." What this implies is that a UFO may not simply be a craft of extraterrestrials, but could belong to a future form of humanity. Time travelers who have achieved temporal navigation. This perspective redefined the Rendlesham incident as something far more profound. In December 1980, a quiet, yet deeply mysterious, series of events unfolded in the forests of England. The Rendlesham Forest incident involved multiple witnesses and is preserved in official military records. Real-time audio captured on cassette tape, physical traces left on the ground, abnormal radiation readings. These are hardly the kinds of details that can be casually dismissed as mere illusion or misinterpretation. And yet, the government's handling of the case seemed less like a calm, rational response and more suggestive of deliberate information control. This incident took place near a NATO base that, during the Cold War, housed nuclear weapons, leading some to speculate that the UFO's purpose may have been surveillance of nuclear-related facilities. This aligns with other cases that point to a connection between nuclear weapons and UFO activity. Now, as UFO-related information is being disclosed worldwide, it may be no coincidence that this case from more than 40 years ago is once again attracting attention. We have now covered one of the largest unsolved UFO incidents in the United Kingdom. How did you feel about this incident? Was it reality or just an illusion? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving it a like.